All right, welcome back to the Ottawa Studios inside my canoe head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, we start off the second week of our 10 weeks of practical preparedness, talking about the most dangerous aspect of your trifecta of preparedness plans, evacuation. Today is about 5 tips, so sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at it. All right, thanks again for joining us. This is the second week, as I said, of your 10 weeks of practical preparedness. This week is going to be dedicated to the second element of your trifecta of preparedness plans, the most dangerous event that could happen to an average family in a modern technologically enabled society, which is evacuation. The outcome of today's podcast is you will have 5 practical, zero-cost tips that will bring you to a state far beyond everybody else around you and will set the conditions for success in case you are ever faced with the highly unlikely but highly impactful event of being forced to evacuate your shelter-in-place location. So thanks again for all of your comments on week 1 of practical preparedness. We got some good tips. We had a couple of people that thought it was a little shallow. I agree. We're going to be a little bit more impactful, a little bit more in-depth this week. We're all learning. We're all having a lot of fun here. So keep your comments coming. If you have something to offer us here at Preparedness Labs Incorporated or the podcast directly at Inside My Canoe Head, drop over to www.insidemycanoehead.ca. It is the website for the podcast. Everything about the podcast there, the support links, everything is there. And down the bottom is a link to drop me an email at jeff@preparednesslabs.ca so that we'll be able to understand, hear everything that you have to tell us about the podcast. So once again, here we are faced with the beginning of a crazy season in weather. We see incredible, if you're an NFL fan, you've seen the state at a number of those NFL games, how cold it is, the amount of snow, and we understand that life impacts how we choose to live, right? So we all have this wonderful, rocking, incredible life. You should have your 2024 strategy ready to go. And actually, you should be in the midst of beginning to execute that incredible plan that you developed. If you don't have a 2024 strategy or you have no idea what I'm talking about, drop back to season 8 of the podcast, available on all platforms. The list is all there. All our previous episodes talks about how to build a 2024 strategic plan and set you and your family up for success so that you're able to navigate all these exogenous shocks that are beyond your control and impact how you go and how you live. But most dangerous. So we think about the events that could happen to the average human being living in a modern technologically enabled society along a spectrum, right? There's so many, the totality of possible events are so numerous that it is impossible for everybody to have a specific response plan or preparedness plan for every single possible thing that could happen to you. I have my flood plan, I have my earthquake plan, I have my this plan, I have that plan. All of that is so totally overwhelming that the 95 percentile or more will just junk it into the bin. Dans la poubelle, as they say en français. We don't care, right? So therefore, the way to look at it and the way to reasonably understand what could happen to you is think about it as a spectrum. And on the left-hand side of the spectrum, we have your most likely, right? This is the event that is most likely, but the least impactful, that's going to interfere with your normal daily operations, how you intend to conduct your life. And that was last week. We started off with the power loss. That is the most likely thing that's going to occur to you. It is impactful, critically impactful for different people depending on your exposure to and dependency on certain elements of critical infrastructure. And we talked about that last week. This week, we're looking at the right end of the spectrum, which is the most dangerous event that could happen to a human family in a developed society. And that is evacuation. So it is very unlikely, but highly impactful and considerably dangerous. And so if you come up with a preparedness plan for you and your family for the ends of the spectrum, then by default, those plans will be sufficient enough for you to navigate everything that could happen in the middle. So when we talk about preparedness and response plans for events that may happen to you, you need 2, one at each end of the spectrum. And this week is about your most dangerous evacuations. And they're most dangerous. And I actually got asked this on the CBC episode that I was a guest on of Marketplace, the last season, the opening episode, when I was brought on as a disaster preparedness expert. When we looked at why is this the most dangerous, it was because it's asking you or forcing you to leave your shelter in place, leaving your home, everything you own, where you feel comfortable, and venturing out in the middle of chaos, right? To things beyond your control. And by doing so and leaving your home and going out into the chaotic world, you are exposing yourself to a whole host of brand new variables that could affect you and things that could happen to you that are beyond your control. You're taking something that is scary and difficult and challenging, but within manageable state while you're sheltering in place, to putting yourself out on the road. And it's incredibly chaotic, and a lot of bad things happen when that occurs. Now, there are two types of evacuations. You can consider them planned or ad hoc. Planned evacuations are the ones you see coming, right? Think about a hurricane hurtling across the South Atlantic, crossing the Lesser Antilles or the Upper Antilles in the Caribbean and headed towards Florida, right? Happens every year. Floridians know about hurricane evacuations, right? They're planned. You can see a hurricane coming from days away. Now, you're never sure where it's going to strike. I get that. But it's a planned evacuation. You can see it coming. You can see the likelihood that I will have to evacuate my residents start to increase. The ad hoc evacuation is the really dangerous one. This is what we try to prepare for. This is you have little to no notice and you have to go now. Not when you want to, not when you think it's a good idea, but you have to go now. That is an incredibly chaotic event because they never happen when everybody's sitting at home ready to go prepared. You've got everything. You got your roots and planning and all the practical tips that we're going to talk about today. And 5 practical tips are free. I keep returning to this. Preparedness is free. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't need to buy anything to become prepared. So that being said, that's a very dangerous thing. So when we think about the chaotic nature of evacuations, you think about everybody at once, right? Everybody from your neighborhood. Think about the small little, nice little windy streets that you live on and very few access points to the arterial routes. And everybody's neighborhood accesses the same arterial routes. And that works well. It gets a little busy during rush hour. But during rush hour, only a portion of people are leaving their house. During evacuations, everybody is leaving their house at the same time on a road system that was not designed to support evacuations, aka parking lots, traffic jams, lineups everywhere. Out of control, seemingly utterly chaotic situations that are beyond your control, when in fact the goal of today's episode is to tell you not really. Not really, my friends. This is the point of what we're doing here today, is we're going to put order into chaos. We're going to give you the practical tips and walk you along that spectrum so that if you're ever faced with an evacuation, you know what to do. You've got a plan. And so now you're executing a well-rehearsed and well-understood plan when everybody else is running around like a chicken trying to figure out what is going on. And remember, this all happens within information fog. And that's similar to the fog of war, where you have conflicting information, lack of information, lack of trusted sources or conflicted trusted sources. And you simply are unaware to a detail that makes you comfortable of what's going on and what you think you should do, and that's information fog. It means you would love to have the following pieces of information to make a logical, informed decision, but you get about 40% of that, and now you have to make a decision that places you and your family's lives at risk with only 40% of the information you want. That's the reality in an evacuation. You're never going to have the level of information you want, and you're still going to have to make consequential decisions as to whether you should go or not go. That's the difficulty with information fog. That's the reality of chaotic situations in evacuations. That's one of the reasons why they're most dangerous. And that, my friends, is why we're here today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get on with your 5 practical tips. Number 1 practical tip for an evacuation from your residence with your family is know where you're going right now. Where if you had to evacuate today and you don't care the reason, we don't care what the reason is. Flood, fire, tornado, hurricane, terrorist act. Like nobody cares, right? Seriously. I don't care why you have to evacuate. If you have to evacuate today, where are you going? Right? Because the Motel 6 in the next town over is not the place where you and your family, stuffed into a hotel room, tired, scared, and hungry. That's not the place while you're sharing everybody else's public Wi-Fi that you're going to try to sort your life out and begin, right? That's not a recipe for success. That's setting your family up for failure if you think you're just going to drive to the next town and get a hotel, right? Because guess what? Everybody else is doing that, right? And so you're going to be paying $250 a night for a hotel, $125 a day for takeout food. You're all stuck in the same room. I love my family, but after 3 days of all of us stuck inside a hotel room with nowhere to go and nothing to do and not knowing what's happening back home and whether our home is still standing, that does not become a happy, joyful place, right? So think about it. Where are you going? So what we recommend here at Inside My Canoe at Preparedness Labs Incorporated is that you have a pre-planned destination. For me, that's your family or friends, a basement or a spare room in somebody else's house where you can go. The reason why private residences are your primary destination of choice is because they're calmer, right? They're calmer. You're sharing just one family's Wi-Fi. You're in a place where you're loved and cared for. You're probably going to have a nice cold beverage, and those of you know what I mean. And you're going to sit down, and now you're in a place of peace and calm where you have a pre-standing agreement that you can stay for a couple of weeks if necessary to start rebuilding your life, to start asking those difficult questions. And you may be back at home in 48 hours, or you may not be going back at home for years because of reconstruction. You don't know. The point being is where do you think you and your family will be safest, calmest, most full of peace, and best taken care of? And that's in the basement of family and friends. And I'll give you an idea because we just don't throw practical tips out there. I have a friend that lives 150 kilometers away. So roughly about 100 miles, about 95 miles away, right? So far enough away from me that we're not likely going to be affected by the same calamity, right? So whatever has affected me is likely not to affect them. So we have a reciprocal agreement that I can go to his basement with my family and his family can come to my basement. We're good to go. We all have blankets and pillows and all that other stuff. Everybody does in your house. I don't need permission. He doesn't need permission. When the event occurs, if he can't get a hold of me to tell me he's coming, then that's perfectly fine. They can show up and we make it work, right? I can stay at his house for a couple of weeks. He can stay at mine. Doesn't cost anything. He's going to have him and his family are going to have a warm place. We're going to take care of them. We're going to feed them. We're going to house them. We're going to water them. We're going to keep them warm. And we're going to do whatever we can to create conditions of peace and calm while they're trying to figure out what their next steps in life are. So find friends, find family, find a couch. That's where you want to be, right? That's your job. Don't wait until an event occurs to find out. This tip costs you nothing, right? It's a reciprocal agreement between friends. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to make any special preparations, etc. Because if the other location is unaffected, the family shows up, you order a pizza, everybody calms down, you hit the G store the next day, you get some extra pasta and beans, whatever it may be. You know what I mean, right? That's the number one thing, is know where you're going and have an absolute unquestionable place that you want to be when your life is upside down and you may have to rebuild. The second practical tip is knowing how you're going to get there. And this may seem weird, but seriously, do you know how to get to your preferred location without GPS or phone? Because you can't make an assumption. And we talked about the cascading effects of critical infrastructure in the last couple of episodes on Inside My Canoe last week and the most likely practical preparedness week. If you have a cascading effect, and these are beyond your control, so you have no decision-making authority on it, you have to assume that GPS and your phone won't be available. right? So as long as you know your two routes, and you have to have two routes because you don't know if the calamity has cut off one, two separate driving routes of how you're going to get from your home to your pre-planned destination. So how are you going to do that, right? How are you going to get to your pre-planned destination? By memory, you're good to go, right? It's not that challenging. You probably know how to do it anyhow, but think through it. Do I know this well enough that at night, if I have to drive and the street lights are out, I'm able to navigate it? That's a great idea. How much gas do you need to get there, right? Part of your transportation planning is, what do I need en route, right? So if it's, for me, it's a 150 kilometer drive. It's about 2 hours because the routes aren't high speed. One of the routes is not high speed highway. So I plan 2 hours. So what do I need in the car for 2 hours? I need nothing, right? Everybody can go 2 hours without food and water. They'll be fine. Yeah. Okay. We'll grab a couple of snacks, but really I'm not concerned about that because it's a 2 hour drive. And you'll question me on that, but I'll tell you why in a minute. The gas is what concerns me, right? I want to make sure I have enough fuel to go. I need X amount of fuel. I never let my car go below that. Basically, that's the planning, right? But in my car, I like to keep basically water, because food is irrelevant. And humans can go days and days without food. They get angry, I'm sure. But you know what? People are just, when we gotta go, water is the key, right? Water is life. So you just keep a flat of that water. And if you don't have any money, then you just fill up a couple of old bottles in the house of pop or whatever you used to have, rinse them out, fill them water, and throw them in your car. Done. Period. But tip number 3, though, is go when you're warned. And this is the part that leads to not really needing a lot of support en route, because you're not waiting for a chaotic event to go. When you're warned that there are forest fires and wildfires in your area that may threaten, everybody needs to be on alert. If you ever hear the fact that your neighborhood might be put on alert or your community might be put on alert to wildfire, GTFO. Seriously. That's when you go. You go when everybody else is thinking about whether it's a good time to go. You go then. The routes will be open. You'll be able to get where you're going, no problem. If the issue's impacting one of your routes, you've got the other route. You go down. Worst case scenario, dead serious. Worst case scenario, you get to have supper with your friends and family in a different town. And when the problem passes by, y'all come back home. No big deal, right? That's the worst. What's wrong with a little visit, right? Go when you're warmed. You have a day vacation. Maybe you stay overnight, have a beer with them, whatever. The point being is if you wait until somebody tells you there's a mandatory evacuation, you're putting you and your family in a parking lot. When you see those long lines on the highway and those long evacuation lines, that's not success, my friends. That's piss poor planning. That's what that is. And I challenge EM folks all the time on this. If you think dumping the entire population on a highway route, packing the highway is considered a successful evacuation, then you've got far more to learn about emergency management than I can help you with. That is not success. Your key as an individual and within your community, and you always talk about these things with your community to create a resilient community, is that you go when you're warned. That's your 3 tips. So right now you've got 3 practical tips to make as successful as you can an evacuation the most dangerous. Number 1, you know exactly where you're going. You've got a wonderful, warm, safe place to go with family that you'll be well taken care of, and a place where you're going to start rebuilding if necessary. You know how to get there without maps, GPS, etc. You've got all the provisions from gas, food, and water you need for the estimated line of the trip, and you know that you're going to go the second you're warned that you may have to go. You're not waiting. So at this point, you're probably good to go. So what could we possibly add for 2 more practical preparedness tips? Well, number 4 is to prep for continued operations at the next location. I sound like an Army guy because I am an Army guy, right? You want to make sure that when you evacuate and you land in the next location, that you are prepared to continue normal operations, right? You likely are not going to be going back to work Fair enough. You'll be taking a few days off work because you're evacuated. I get that. But the idea is to carry on, continue normal operations. If you work from home like I do from a laptop, I travel all over Canada, hopefully around the world, actually leaving Canada in a couple of weeks for a trip. But the point being is that I travel ready to carry on normal operations, right? So I bring my IT, the laptop, things like that. Bring the things, clothes necessary, right? And people always say, what do I bring when I evacuate? And there are all kinds of websites that give you these wonderful checklists. Here's the thing. I'm not going to nail those down because most of those are junk anyhow with great intents. What do you do for a living and what do you need to carry on operations to conduct that? I need a laptop and a power cord. I need power cords for my cell phones. I need clothes to wear, always comfortable clothes. And I need my primary documents. So basically what we do here in this family is we have one envelope with all of our primary emergency documents in it. It's in a filing cabinet in my office, right? Well labeled. When I got to evacuate, I grabbed that. Now I got everybody's primary documents, not worried about losing anything. Priceless items. How do you define priceless items? Like if you ask somebody, what would you take? Well, I want to take everything. I want to take all the photo albums. I want to take all the pictures. Like you get to a point in life where you realize what is truly priceless. And priceless is defined as something that irrespective of the amount of money you may have access to on the face of this earth, there is no way in humanity that you are able to replace this item. Full stop. Very, very direct definition. So it's literally going to be for most normal people, and I hate to use that that descriptor, but it's basically going to be less than a handbag full of stuff, right? So for me, it's literally two things, right? Used to be three. I don't care about the other one anymore. There's two things. One is the Bible. My dad's Bible. He passed away many, many years ago. And there's an inscription in it from my great-grandmother in 1955, right? I can get another Bible, but I can never get my dad's Bible. And the second one is a souvenir from my tours of duty in Afghanistan. And I can't replace that because the Taliban own the country now. So those are the two things I'm grabbing and my document and going. Everything else can burn to the freaking ground because I can get money and I can replace it. There's nothing else. Every picture is up in the cloud. I can get my cloud. The storm's not, or whatever the calamity is not going to destroy the cloud. So you have to define what a priceless item is. And if you have those in your house, and you probably do, what you need to do is to make a list ahead of time, right? And then print out the list. And the reason this is important is if you have to evacuate ad hoc, really at a short notice, and you've only got like 5 minutes to run around your house and grab. And we did this exercise on Marketplace when we had 3 different families in the Halifax region, and we gave them that thing. We told them, right, without warning them, you have 5 minutes to evacuate. What are you grabbing? Go. And we filmed it. And then I critiqued what they grabbed afterwards. And the one family that just blew me away and they're amazing, they had a list. They had a prepared list. If I'm leaving the house in evacuation, this is what I'm taking, right? And so there was no thinking involved. They didn't have to worry about forgetting something. They did all of the planning in blue sky, calm times. They had this really well-developed list, and it was only about 15 items, right? Because everything else can burn down. You can replace it with money. And so they grabbed the 15 items. They followed the list that they created. They believed themselves, and they weren't thinking, they were executing, which is far more easy to do in times of stress. So they had the list, right? And they had a bag of clothes. And what I always say to people is, what do you want to be wearing in times of evacuation? It's a sweatsuit. It's something comfortable. It's your favorite piece of gear, whatever. Basically, I bring a change of clothes for the family. That's it. So evacuation is actually not complicated, but I prepared to continue operations at the next location. Orientate it, because if your house goes down and you work online or you work remote or you do something that enables you to continue work, you have to keep doing work while you're evacuated, right? There's no magical days off with pay that you get because life has thrown you a curveball. You still got to get out there and get after it, right? So because of that, you need to bring the things along. So that's your fourth tip. The fifth and the final tip is one that I never see on anybody's list for evacuations. You need to be intimately knowledgeable of your insurance coverage. You've made a selection to have insurance. Well, hopefully you have. If you're a renter, you need to have renter and liability insurance. Liability insurance covers in case you're the one who did something dumb and caused the apartment building to burn down. Because if it was you, they can sue you and make you pay for the replacement costs of the apartment building. So you buy liability insurance for that. The second one is your personal effects, right? So if you run out of the burning apartment building in the middle of the night and the apartment building burns down and you don't have any insurance, then it's your fault that you don't have your stuff anymore. And it's your fault that you are now looking for everybody else in the community and the government to somehow give you money to cover the lost items because you chose to not purchase insurance, right? So you have to have insurance. If you're a homeowner and you have a mortgage, at least here in Canada, fire insurance is a legal minimum and liability insurance is a legal minimum. So whatever insurance product you have chosen to purchase, whatever insurance product is within your budget, you need to intimately know exactly how that works. And that comes with a couple of key questions. So number one is, exactly what are your responsibilities? Know ahead of time that when an event happens, this is exactly what the insurance company needs me to do. I need to know what my items are. I need to inform them at this time. I need to tell them this information. Whatever it may be, it's laid out in your insurance policy. And if you don't know that specifically, call up your broker and say exactly step by step in normal human, non-legal terms, what am I expected to do when I have a loss? The second thing is what am I covered for, right? Insurable losses, uninsured losses, act of gods, act of terrorism, overland, flooding risk. Like there's a whole bunch of different terminology that you are probably not familiar with because this is not your world, but it is your responsibility because it's your insurance policy for you to know it intimately. So if you don't know exactly what you're covered for and you don't know what your exclusions are, you need to contact your insurance agent and walk through that. What could happen to my home that I'm not covered? And they could say the number of exclusions are in your policy. And you're like, no, dude, I want your words, step by step, what I'm not covered for. You pay for insurance, you pay for that service, demand that service. And then what for you does a total loss look like? So this is the uncomfortable part and the last part of planning for an evacuation that's uncomfortable. A lot of people skip it. They don't want to look into the gnarly abyss and try to figure out what that world looks like. The point is this: what does a total loss look like for your family? Whether you're renters or owners, whether you're in northern England, eastern Germany, whether you're in southern Italy, whether you're with some of our listeners in Colombia, whether you live in Singapore, whether you live in Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, North America, in Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, it doesn't matter where you live. What does a total loss look like? What have you lost? What is your insurance coverage exactly cover, and then what's the gap that you've accepted? Because there's likely always going to be a gap, right? There's going to be a loss that's not insured or a portion of a loss that's not insured because total 100%, no questions asked insurance is available. It's just for the most of us prohibitively expensive, right? So if you live in a flooding area, it's almost impossible in some areas of the United States to get flood insurance. So what does that total loss look for you? Lay it out. I've lost A. The insurance covers B. A minus B equals C. C is that uninsured gap that you now have to consider. And the last part of insurance, the fifth practical tip, is what is your plan for a total loss? This, again, is part B of the uncomfortable conversation you have to have with yourself, is when you suffer a total loss, when your entire world is upside down, your house is burned down, been flooded, been destroyed, hit by a tornado, whatever it may be, when everything is gone, but what you were able to evacuate with as you're sitting in your friend's basement having a beer, that's not the time to figure out what your next steps are, right? It's too late. Think about it in times of peace and calm. Sit down and figure out, I've lost a house. This is what I'm planning to evacuate with. So this is what myself and my family, all of my loved ones have. I've got, because really in the end it matters. Everybody's here. Everybody's safe. Everybody's healthy. The few priceless items you've got, even if you lost those, life goes forward. You need to be executing a well understood and well thought out plan from the time of your total loss, not sitting there at that time in a chaotic, uncomfortable, high-stressed, high-anxiety situation and trying to figure out what you do next. That is setting you and your family up for unnecessarily difficult times in the middle of a chaotic environment. So all 5 of these tips that I've given you today cost no money. Number 1, know where you're going, have a pre-planned destination. Motel 6 or a public shelter is a bad recipe. Number 2, know how you're going to get there. Know at least 2 routes, know what you need en route, know how to get there without any GPS. So can you drive there at night with just headlights and no street lights? Number 3 is to understand that you need to go when you're warned. Don't wait for something called a mandatory evacuation or in the middle of chaos. When they warn that you are on alert, get out. Worst case scenario, have a day vacation. Number 4, prep for continued operations at your next location. However your family executes their lives, to the best of your ability, be prepared and have a plan to continue normal operations, continue earning your income, continuing to do what you do from the temporary location. And the last one is insurance. Have it, number 1. If you don't have it, there's nothing I can do to help you. Have insurance, the best that you can afford, and that will depend on your income and your ability, but understand the product that you have, understand what your loss looks like, understand what's covered, and then understand the piece that's not covered, and then have a plan for what total loss looks like for you and your family. Following those 5 practical tips, my friend, you and your family will be better situated to navigate the most dangerous end of the spectrum of events that could happen to you. You're in a position, you've done the work. Preparedness is free. It just takes time and effort, a commitment from you for the people that you love, care about, and are responsible for. And with a evacuation plan, you and your family, you have the list of what you're taking is printed out, ready to go. You know where you're going. Your family's prepared. Everybody understands their responsibilities. When the shizzy hits the fizzy, you're not texting like a madman trying to figure out what everybody's doing and trying to give instructions on a cell network that just went down because of the calamity. With that, follow these 5 tips and you and your family will be much better off. And this kicks off week 2 of our 10-week of practical preparedness. So this week, you're going to have a number of reels coming out. We're going to have a longer form video, a second podcast that'll go through an evacuation scenario at the end of the week, and a number of other things we're putting out this week to talk about evacuations to set you and your family up for success to the greatest extent you can in the face of what is the most dangerous activity and event that could happen to you. So thanks for joining us here at Inside My Canoe Head. We appreciate your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. Tell us what you think. Be unapologetically you. You can DM me across all of my social media. The Jeff at preparednesslabs.ca is available to link on both of my websites, either insidemycanoehead.ca or preparednesslabs.ca. If you're interested in supporting this podcast, you value what we do here, and you just want to throw us a bone, there's a button on our insidemycanoehead.ca, takes you to buy me a coffee, and for $5 Canadian, you can buy me wonderful, beautiful black coffee, my favorite beverage to drink, even more better than whiskey. 2024 is the year that we are going to make a difference in the community's emergency preparedness. We're doing this for free across the spectrum for everyone because that's what we need to do to build resilient communities. Provide free, evidence-based, research-focused information. So thanks again for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head. I hope you have a wonderful week. Pay attention, stay safe, and we'll see you on Friday.